Man, it is a pleasure to have you on board. Our good friend Dan Varroney is with us.
I am in Virginia.
Man, it isn't. Thanks for your patience this morning. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the air.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on the air with you.
Two-time author, #1 Amazon best-selling author of Rethinking Economic Growth. I posted that link up on the page. You must have an opinion here on what's going on. We've heard the full gamut. Prices are going to spike. Prices are going to drop. In the news yesterday, shares of Chevron jumped 6%. I think you are probably well aware of that. Obviously, the result of Trump's military intervention in Venezuela. But what does this mean for prices at the pump? What does this mean for the overall U.S. economy? What say you?
Great question, and boy, that's a big question. A few words with a lot of answers. So, bottom line is that energy prices are economic multipliers for better or for worse. So, here's where we are: gas prices across the board, pre-Venezuela this weekend, were down about 20-25% from a year ago. That's very good news. Why it matters is pre-Venezuela is that. That has impact on inputs into the economy, from fertilizer, feedstock, diesel prices, all of those things impact inflation and the cost of things. It's one of the measures that the Federal Reserve looks closely at when they're making determinations on interest rates. So that's part one of this. So part two is, what are the implications of what happened in terms of energy prices, gasoline prices, and affordability here in the U.S.? Let's get right to it. So we have to know what we don't know. So in my consulting practice, I tell clients all the time, we have to act on what we know versus what we think. Right now, there's a lot we don't know, right? So we don't know what the infrastructure is or isn't in Venezuela these days. We don't know how quickly, in addition to Chevron, oil companies will want to get back in, what kind of security guarantees they'll want or not, what the status of the government is or isn't. A lot of these questions have got to be answered before we can rationalize what'll be any price issues. But if we were to take the leap and say, all things being equal, that the government will be stabilized, that all of the energy companies, in addition to Chevron, want to get in, and they get what they need to build their infrastructure. The infrastructure could take 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number of years to get up to speed. So all those factors are on the table. But what does this mean? Will it be a price stabilizer? Will it be a price shock? The one thing I can say is, from my perspective, that when you add supply to a market like the U.S. market, the greater the supply, the lower the price. So if you've got a supply and lower demand, prices are going to come down. So that's the way I see it today. But I see it that way because there's a lot we don't know, if that makes any sense.
So there could be, you're kind of suggesting there could be a little supply surplus, maybe.
It could be, sure, without a doubt. So with President Trump coming back into office, he has lowered the regulations, eased a lot of the permitting issues, and there's a lot of onshore drilling here in the U.S. And I think that matters. But I want to raise something else for you, JD.
Please.
You didn't ask it, but what I want to do is I want to sort of play a little bit of 4 or 5 dimensional chess on this stuff. So when I look at things, when I heard the news on Saturday, clearly I thought about affordability and pricing. I checked that box. I thought that through. But then I looked from a global perspective and I just said, no, what exactly does this mean? What are the impacts? So you may remember that when President Trump was campaigning over the last couple of years for another term of the presidency, he indicated that he said that if he were in office, that President Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. So let's get to the why of that. When prices per barrel are $45 or lower, Russia can't afford to pay for war because Russia is a one-trick pony in their economy. It is oil. They are a big oil producer. They're like one big gas station. So when their prices are at $45 or lower, they don't have the money to afford a war. In President Trump's first term, prices were at or below that level, right? So they didn't invade. So what I thought is this an opportunity to lower the price per barrel globally? And if so, might this also mean a potential end over whatever period of time to the war in Ukraine? Question mark. So as we think about this, we need to think about these things in global terms. I think about it domestically from affordability, then I think about it globally. And then the other piece of that, multi-dimensional strategic chess game is we've got China, Hezbollah, and Iran and Russia involved in South America, specifically in Venezuela, and we've got Cuba there. What does this all mean if they go away? Well, it could mean more global stability. Could mean. So I want us to be thinking about this on the grandest possible scale and saying, what are the potential impacts? But before we get to those potential impacts, the things in front of us have to be figured out. They've got to be answered. Will the government that's there right now be responsive to the president and to Secretary of State Rubio? Question mark. What's the status of the infrastructure? Question mark. What is the willingness of the energy companies, in addition to Chevron, going back into Venezuela? So questions, but there's different possibilities on the table.
We need to remember that Venezuela currently produces less than 1% of global oil, the whole supply.
Yeah, we absolutely need to know that. But here's one thing. Here's one thing that I would absolutely keep in mind. Here's one thing that I absolutely keep in mind. That when you look at what the U.S. produces and what Venezuela produces, because right now they're not pumping at capacity. And oh, by the way, we don't really know what their reserves are. Could be 100 billion, 100 billion gallons. We don't know that either. But potentially we could have a situation where the U.S. controls a fairly considerable share on a percentage basis of the world's global oil output. That would be a win from national security purposes. It would be a win in terms of price stability and price stabilization.
Are you still with me?
I am.
Do you feel that a lot of this is, where's the separation between reality and a little bit of fear mongering?
So I encourage people on both sides of the conversation to look at things as objectively as they can and on a strategic basis. We had illegal drugs pouring into the country, and they were killing somewhere between 100 and 300,000 Americans. It was beyond dangerous. It was untenable. And we needed, as a country, to not only secure our borders, but to make sure that drug traffic slowed and came to a stop. It was just imperative that happened. So while people may disagree or agree with that it happened, at the end of the day, we owe it to our citizens and to ourselves to make sure that we are secure as a country. So at the face of it, strategically, the decision to do what was done on Saturday makes perfect sense.
What say you, Dan, about Canada in the mix here? I've had some comments over the last couple of days that Canada is one of the big players here and maybe the sleeping giant.
So interesting. So right now, we've got pipeline agreements and there's oil flowing from Canada because they have considerable reserves. Now, on the other hand, if things worked out to optimum conditions and there was access to Venezuelan oil, we might get oil at a lower price point from Venezuela than we do from Canada. And honestly, it may set up a competitive situation where Canada might lower its pricing.
So, bottom line, what you're saying is we all need to basically, bottom line here, take a deep breath and relax. There might be some medium to long term effects here, but if there are, there's some geopolitical risk, but take a deep breath here and stop freaking out. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. To me, on a strategic basis, people need to act on what we know versus what we think.
Yeah.
If we act on what we know versus what we think, we will all take a deep breath and say, maybe we should pause and take a step back and see how this works out.
Yeah.
Because if it works out favorably for the Venezuelan people and favorable for the U.S., then I think we've got a win-win going.
What do you think of the of Chevron shares jumping 6% or more?
Well, so that's the one energy company, the one U.S.-based energy company that still has a presence in Venezuela. They stand to gain immediately if things work out favorably.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense that their shares jumped.
You have stock in Chevron?
I don't know that. We've got a financial manager, and I haven't looked at it in the last couple of months.
Huh. Tell us about your book, Rethinking Economic Growth.
So this is my second book, and I absolutely love this book for the following reasons. One of which is the heart and soul of the U.S. economy are small businesses. 99.9% of the companies come from small business. 2 of 3 private sector jobs come from small business. Half the U.S. workforce comes from small business. When small business is doing well, the overall economy is doing well here in the United States. This is a book that tells the story of small business. There are 12 case studies, 12 different industries, and there are 35 small business leaders that speak with passion about their concerns, their challenges, their opportunities, how they've adapted, and what the way forward is. They talk about how they build these ecosystems inside their communities, and they create their own magnifier effect, how they play a role in supporting, sustaining, and driving community prosperity. And it ends with a roadmap for small businesses for things that they can do on a policy basis to make business conditions even more favorable. But what I will tell you is the 2 things that I heard the most in the interviews and in the survey that we conducted of a couple hundred small business owners is as follows. We learned that the cost of regulations is prohibitive. And what I mean by that is that the last administration imposed regulatory costs to the tune of about $1.4 trillion. If you're a small business and on average they employ 8 or fewer people, you don't have the scale to support compliance and pay compliance costs. So that really squeezed them in a substantial manner. The second thing is they need access to affordable capital. And those were the 2 big things. Things that they were excited about were the big, beautiful law, having 100% expensing, first-year expensing for plants and equipment. But they want certainty in tax policy. They want certainty in regulatory policy. They're absolutely determined and interested in the federal government and state and local governments coming up with a scaled version of regulations for small businesses.
Who's the fascinating to hear that, Dan? Who's the, in your opinion, and maybe you don't have one, I don't know, some of your notable small business friendly states in America?
So that's a really good question. So I can go immediately to Indiana, to Texas, to Florida, to Alabama, to Georgia, to Nevada. I can go to Wyoming. I would start with those states, but I will tell you the Northeast and California are very challenging. One of the small business leaders that I interviewed lives and works in California, and he described circumstances that were beyond challenging. And there's a lot of regulation, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of it not very necessary. But there are states that are very friendly. Currently, I'm in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia is small business friendly. North Carolina, South Carolina. I already told you Alabama. Mississippi is another one.
We have a good number of Vermonters that have communicated with me over the last couple of years, saying that Vermont is taking a pretty good slide with how small business friendly it is. I hear that more. For every one of those, for every 10 of those, I probably hear one that Vermont is small business friendly. We got a lot of work to do in this little Green Mountain state.
I will tell you, there's the situation comes to, there's a desire. Look, not all regulations are bad. Regulations are necessary. But what needs to be kept in mind is that there's a cost of too much regulation. So if small businesses are generating 2 out of 3 private sector jobs, if small businesses are collaborating and supporting local communities, we need to really think about a scalable version of a regulatory structure that small businesses can comply with, where they're not going to be squeezed. And the same goes with taxes. Small businesses operate on incredibly tight margins, and one miss one way or the other means they're either going to lay people off or they're closing down. So if we want economies to grow locally, regionally, in different states, and then nationally, we have got to think differently about how we regulate, how we tax small businesses. Small businesses are the key to growth in this country. So why I wrote the book is that I noted between 1961 and 2024, we hadn't had a consistent 3% economic growth. You're going to say, Dan, so why does that matter? It matters because, the size of our economy is, in round numbers, around $30 trillion. 3% is almost $1 trillion in additional investment that we can put back into the economy. So 3% growth matters. I believe the way to consistent 3% growth is through small business. That can and will only happen with scaled and smart regulation and tax policy, and in addition to that, certainty around scaled regulation and tax policy.
We also need to rethink the way we shop, Dan. I mean, we've been pushing that on the air here for the last couple of months. We always do leading up to the holidays. But man, it's like if you're spending your buck locally, it's going to stay in your local economy. And so many of us love to shop from the couch, Temu, Shein, Amazon, whatever it may be. But man, you got to support your local businesses to keep them alive.
Without a doubt. So we have local hardware stores and coffee shops and different restaurants that we go into. So even in a franchise situation like an IHOP, they are in fact locally owned, right?
Right.
A UPS store is in fact locally owned.
Sure.
Ace Hardware is in fact locally owned.
Yep.
And my wife and I are in those stores all the time because they're locally owned. And it matters. So what's interesting, I remember when we were raising our kids, our son was always in the league baseball, and it was the small businesses that were the sponsors of the teams.
Yes.
For gosh sakes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Small businesses give back into the community. And oh, by the way, when our kids in school age, when they turn 16, they're able to work. They work at the small businesses. When they come home in between semesters in college, where they work at small businesses. Small businesses are deeply rooted in every community around this country.
Yeah. Well said, man. I appreciate your time so much. Rethinking Economic Growth is the name of his book. Dan, how do you pronounce your last name now? I want to make sure I got it right.
Sure, it's Varroney,
Varroney.
and the book can be found on Amazon. It's on Amazon.com. And I hope your listeners not only buy the book, read the book, encourage small businesses to get the book. And if there are any elected officials or policymakers listening to your podcast, I encourage them to read this book, because the stories that are told by these small business leaders in each of the case studies are very compelling, and they will get a lot of great information from them.
I'm told that we have a few legislators that are listening this morning. Vermont's next legislative session begins today. So the timing is perfect for this. And I again, Dan, I really appreciate your time. Can we sneak you on again sometime?
Absolutely. I'm also happy to talk about the jobs issue, interest rates, so on and so forth.
I'm gonna email you. Let's do that real soon.
Sounds great. Look forward to it. And thank you so much for having me on, and have a great rest of the day.
I appreciate it. You as well, Dan.